Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be covering the Lightroom mobile app and all of the features that you need to know in order to create beautiful images. We're going to be covering what each feature is, what it does, how to use it, and when. I feel like there's a lot of you out there who have the mobile app on your phone but have no idea how to use it. This is a video just for you. Again, today will be a walkthrough of each feature and what it does, but I plan on making another video where I show you guys how I edit my photos. So if that's something that you're interested in, please consider subscribing. I make weekly tutorials just like this one. The Lightroom mobile app is such an incredibly powerful app. I'm amazed with how much you can do on it. You can almost do every single thing that you can on the desktop version, and this is free. Sometimes when I'm traveling and I don't have my laptop near me, I'll throw some photos on there and edit while I'm on the go. It's so convenient to have such a powerful app literally at your fingertips. So without further ado, let's hop straight into the video. So we're gonna go ahead and dive straight into Lightroom, and I apologize if my fat fingers get in the way, but I'll try to make sure that you can see everything. So here we have our library module. Here you're gonna see all of the photos that you've imported, and you'll actually be able to tell which photos are RAW or JPEG as they will be labeled on this menu. But let's go ahead and open up a photo that we can try and edit. So here I've got my image, and I'm going to walk you through each and every button. It can be super overwhelming trying to absorb all this information at once, but don't worry because we're gonna break this down step by step. Now up at the top of the screen, you're gonna see some options. If we tap on this question mark, it'll actually show us some helpful tools if you're struggling to figure out what you're trying to do. Next to that is the share icon, which allows you to export your photo. And next to that is the cloud icon. If you're using the desktop version of Lightroom, you'll be able to sync up your photos, and this will simply tell you the status of that sync. And last, we have these three dots, which will allow you to organize your photos, view options, copy and paste presets, create a preset, slideshow, and settings. But enough of the boring stuff. Let's go ahead and figure out how to edit. Down at the bottom, you're going to notice some tools. Here we have selective, healing, crop, profiles. We'll actually dive into these a little later, and we're going to start with everything from auto and onward. Now, if we go ahead and just tap on auto, it will do an automatic edit for us. It's not usually a good idea to do this too often, and it kind of takes out the fun in editing, but it's there if you want it. So now let's say we want to undo that action. You'll notice up here, this little undo icon has appeared, and we can go ahead and tap that to go backward. In the first menu, we'll see light, and this little pull-up menu will come up from the bottom, allowing you to adjust your exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, and also your tone curve. The exposure will adjust how much light is entering this photo as an average. Contrast will increase, the contrast, and so on and so forth. This part is pretty self-explanatory, fortunately. So let's say we made an adjustment and we want to reset it back to 0. All you have to do is go ahead and double tap on the word, boop, boop, and it will reset just like it did here. And the last feature in this menu is the tone curve. Now, if you don't know what the tone curve is, it's basically a graph of values of light that you can adjust with a curve. Shadows and blacks here at the bottom, and highlights and whites here at the top. Generally, you'll want something called an S curve, which kind of looks something like this. Again, this is super over-exaggerated and does not look great, but for the sake of explaining, you generally want this gentle S. But if this feature scares you, don't worry about it. You can still get a great edit without even having to touch the tone curve at all. But it is here if you want to. We'll just go ahead and undo that real quick. And I'll go ahead and just kind of tweak this while we're here. The next window is color, and in my opinion, this is where you get to have some fun. Right off the bat, you will notice your color temperature being warmer or colder with this slider, pushing the tint to magenta or green. Now, if we continue to scroll down, you'll notice you also have vibrance and saturation. You can have Lightroom do an auto white balance by selecting this eyedropper tool and then selecting where you want it to sample from. There's also a black and white feature, or you can use these presets for white balance. But those look pretty bad, so we're just not gonna touch that. And the fun part is here under mix. Go ahead and tap that and you'll find an HSL slider, which stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. And you guessed it, that's where you can manipulate the hue, saturation, and luminance. Now we can go in color by color and make selective edits to each color in our image. So for example, if you wanted to push blues into teal, you'd simply click on blue and then push this over to the teal. And you can already see right here that kind of coming into place. Let's do that again. Or for example, let's say you wanted to add a bit more color into the skin. You can go over to orange and we could push the saturation up just like that. But this is kind of where you can get creative with colors and try to hone in your style and just kind of experiment with the look that you're going for. So let's say there's a color that you're having a hard time identifying, for example, her beanie. Go ahead and tap on this target icon and you can click directly on that color and adjust it by sliding your finger up and down. Now this looks horrible obviously because we're adjusting the hue, so let's try something else. You can go ahead and switch that down here at the bottom by selecting hue, saturation, or luminance. Let's say we want to add a little bit more brightness into this specific shade of brown, and we can go ahead and tap and then drag up or down to increase that. And again, that's a little too close to the skin color, which is why we're seeing her face go up and down with it, but you get the idea. Moving on to the next tab, we have effects. Here you're going to find texture, clarity, dehaze, vignette, grain, and split toning. So to go one by one, texture just adds stuff, which is a little hard to explain, but if we zoom in, you'll see what I mean. And we'll just push up texture all the way. You may not be able to see that, but her skin's looking a little more porous, and that's kind of what texture does. But it is safe for me to say this, anything under this effects tab, you kind of want to take it easy because most of these features under this menu have a very specific purpose. So don't go too crazy and take it easy. Clarity just adds clarity, and you can decrease clarity by going the other way. Next, we have dehaze, which is what you would use in case some light got into your lens and actually washed out your subject. That happens to me quite a bit because I love to shoot with the sun behind my subject, but if too much light enters the lens, it kind of bounces around and causes the subject to get a little washed out. You can go ahead and just use dehaze and that will solve your issue. And here we have vignette, which is pretty self-explanatory. You'll actually try to remove vignette even to the point of adding white, and if you push it to the left, we can add a vignette. And if we do apply a vignette, you'll notice these grayed out sliders are now active, and these are just to edit that vignette. And last we have grain, but grain is more of a stylistic choice. Again, all these features you want to use a little sparingly and not push it too hard. Last in this section is split toning. And here is where we can add some color into the highlights and shadows. You can tap anywhere on the screen and drag this up or down to control the intensity of the color, and left or right to change the hue itself. And after you've established your split toning, you can change the balance back and forth depending on how much you want to show. But that looks horrible, so we're just going to remove those. And moving on to detail, we're going to find sharpening and noise reduction. Here you can add sharpness to your image, and you can control the radius, detail, and masking of that sharpening. You can also add noise reduction and specify what type of noise or grain you want to be removed. Again, be careful with both of these features. It's very easy to ruin a photo by pushing either one of these too far. Moving on to optics, here's where we can deal with chromatic aberration and lens correction. So sorry if these are big words, but chromatic aberrations are simply imperfections of green or purple fringing that enter the picture due to too low of an aperture or sometimes low quality lenses. It's safe to always turn this on, so we're just going to do that. And beneath that, we'll find enable lens corrections. Now, you probably won't need to use this unless you're shooting on a very wide or a very tight lens. And why I say that is because the focal length of your lens may distort your image. It just kind of like pushes up from the middle, and we call that barrel distortion. The opposite is when it looks squeezed in, and that is called a pin cushion distortion. Again, you don't need to really worry about these if you're using a mid-range lens. The metadata of your lens and camera are already baked into the photo, so it will actually know how to correct it properly. Now to geometry, here we can control that distortion I was talking about, as well as control the vertical and horizontal axis in case a photo wasn't aligned properly. So here in distortion, we can kind of see what I was talking about earlier. This is pin cushion distortion, and this is barrel distortion. Obviously this looks horrible, but if you need to compensate manually, you can. Moving on, we have the vertical distortion. Let's say you want to appear a little taller in your images, you can go ahead and push this to the left, and that could do it. Again, it might distort your image a little too much, so just like anything in this tutorial, take it with a grain of salt. Horizontal, we're going to get the same thing, just on the y-axis. And here's where you can find rotate if you need to adjust anything. Now, this is different than the rotate tool that we'll talk about later, so you may not want to use this if you're just trying to fix a photo. Next is the aspect, which simply controls how well it touches the edge of the frame. Again, you kind of don't really want to touch this one too much. Scale is if we want to zoom in here, and same thing here with the offset. We can just move the photo back and forth if we need to make some minor corrections. After geometry, here's where you can access presets. I've already made a couple test presets here, so we can slap one on and then hit the check to say okay. No presets are perfect, so we're gonna have to go ahead and tweak this if we actually want to make an edit, but I'm just trying to illustrate that if you want to save presets, you can here. Now, versions is a neat little feature that I recently discovered. I'm actually a big fan of it. If you have commitment issues and you're a little scared of what you're doing to your photos, you can create versions. So we'll go ahead and create create a version here, boop, just like this. We'll name this test, and boom, now we have another version. So this is a snapshot of this edit, and you can venture off and test other stuff without the fear of ruining an edit if you liked where it was before. And lastly on the menu is reset. And here we can decide how far back we want to go. We can go to adjustments, remove all, or go to import or open. Now let's say you want to see your before and after. It's super easy. All you have to do is go ahead and tap and hold on the screen, and then you can see your before. Let go and you'll see where your photo's at right now. Pretty neat. Now let's go ahead and cover these 4 sections that I didn't talk about earlier. First up, we'll start with Selective. Selective is pretty fun because we can control specific areas of the photo. You can go ahead and start by creating either a brush, radial filter, or gradient. The brush is simple as it is. You can simply just paint the area that you want to affect, and that's about it. Then you can control the lighting in that specific area, etc. Then you have radial, which is the same thing but simply in a circle shape. And lastly, we have a gradient filter. You just go ahead and drag across the screen and you can make this gradient. But let's say, for example, we wanted to add a little bit more light to our subject here. You could go ahead and create your filter. A helpful tool too is you can actually adjust the mask even after it's set. Let's say we want to erase a certain portion. You know, maybe we don't want the background affected per se. We can go ahead and just erase that from our mask like so. It's not pretty, but you get the idea. And now we have healing, which is our spot removal tool. We can control the size of this brush by simply going to the top circle, tapping on that and dragging up or down to increase the size, and there you can see on the screen. Below that we have the feather, and similar issue, we can just drag up or down to increase or decrease that feather. It will automatically pick a spot to clone from, but it's picking her hat and we definitely don't want that, hee. But what's nice is we can control the sampled area simply by tapping and dragging it to another spot. So let's say we wanted to get rid of that light for whatever reason, move it over here, and boom, there you go. Here we have our crop. This is where we're actually going to want to rotate, not what we had earlier. We can go ahead and tap on this first one, and here are a bunch of different aspect ratios that we can choose from. The most popular one would probably be this 4x5, which is the typical size for an Instagram post. You can go ahead and lock or unlock the image if you want to keep the dimensions the same. You can rotate the image left or right by tapping these, but if you just need to make minor corrections, if it's crooked, you simply just drag here and slide back and forth. And then last is a flip horizontal option if you want that. Here under profiles, you're going to find some presets. I generally don't touch these, but they're here if you want. Whew, well, that was a long one. If you made it to the end of the video, good job. Get yourself some ice cream or something, and nice work for making it all the way to the end of the video. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, please like it. If this video brought you value or taught you something new, please consider subscribing. I make weekly tutorials just like this video, so comment below if you have a question or topic that you'd like me to cover next. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.